Americans for Fair Taxation presents the weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, March 10th, 2023. Our Chairman's Report this week was written by Chad Hagen and published in the Epoch Times on March 3rd, 2023. Chad is a member of our advisory board. Here's his article. The FAIRtax Act can benefit all Americans. On January 10th, 2023, Representative Buddy Carter of Georgia introduced H.R. 25, the FAIRtax Act, to replace the current tax code with a national consumption tax known as the FAIRtax. Each household will receive a monthly prebate based on federal poverty levels and household size that will allow families to purchase necessary goods such as food, shelter, and medicine essentially tax-free. This is similar to our current individual exemption and refundable tax credit system, said Representative Carter. Representatives Andrew Clyde of Georgia, Jeff Duncan of South Carolina, Kat Cammack of Florida, Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, Bob Good of Virginia, Thomas Massey of Kentucky, Ralph Norman of South Carolina, Bill Posey from Florida, Gary Palmer of Alabama, and Jim Banks, Indiana, and Barry Loudermilk, Georgia, also joined Representative Carter as sponsors of the bill. Now, the beginnings of the FAIRtax Act originated in the 1990s. In 1995 and 1996, a number of tax reforms attempting to move away from the present income tax were proposed by the Republicans. Steve Forbes promoted the idea of a 17% flat tax, and then the first iteration of a FAIRtax/flat tax bill was introduced in 1999 by Georgia Congressman John Linder. Since then, the FAIRtax has become the leading tax reform movement in the country. The bill eliminates all personal and corporate income taxes, the death tax, gift taxes, and the payroll tax, and replaces them all with a national retail sales tax. Further, the FAIRtax would eliminate the need for the Internal Revenue Service and the filing of forms and keeping of receipts. Each taxpayer will get their entire paycheck plus the prebate based on their family size. Therefore, a taxpayer pays their federal taxes each time there's a purchase of new retail goods and retail services. Now, at the moment, the FAIRtax Act has a good amount of support, but it needs more. Democrats and certain GOP members in Congress are rolling up their sleeves to fight the fight against dismantling our current income tax system, and so are the special interest groups. While it's not surprising that the politicians who oppose the FAIRtax Act may be misguided or influenced by lobbyists, the irony is that the FAIRtax Act hits tax policy where it matters most and offers up a worthwhile solution. If Congress passed the FAIRtax, it would send a signal of accomplishment, progress, the right type of progress, and solutions. But sadly, Washington, D.C. does not like solutions. At the moment, there is a resistance campaign against the FAIRtax Act. Most pundits and naysayers are focusing on one negative soundbite, that everyone's going to have to pay a 30% sales tax on everything they buy. The critics, however, are forgetting the major point that under the FAIRtax Act, working Americans will get their entire paychecks because there's no income tax and no federal payroll tax deductions. But this 30% tax on everything you buy is just not true, as Savannah Pointer from the Epoch Times reported. The FAIRtax Act of 2023 states that the tax rate would be 23% in 2025, with adjustments in subsequent years. And that would be in lieu of the current income taxes, payroll taxes, and estate and gift taxes. There's also the incorrect rumor that states the poor will suffer while the rich reap the benefits. Now, we've all heard this before, and in this instance, it is categorically untrue. Today, if a family of four earns $3,333 a month or $40,000 annually, the payroll tax rate is 7.65%. That figures out to be $255 a month or $3,060 annually, and that's not factoring in additional income taxes and withholding. If this family filed the Earned Income Tax Credit, that family would be eligible to receive $3,274, but this tax credit is not always taken advantage of. Now, under the FAIRtax Act, there's no withholding. This family would receive the entire $40,000 or $3,333 a month. The family is not taxed on the amount of spending up to the poverty level published by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services each year, and the 2023 poverty level for a family of 4 is $39,440. It turns out that the actual rate this family would end up paying is 0.0041% of their income, not 30%. Now here's a comparison. Let's look at a $40,000 income and a family of 4. Under the present income tax system, this family will have after taxes $37,784 to spend and will pay an effective tax rate of 3%. With the fair tax, their net spendable income is $39,835, and again, their effective tax rate 0.0041%. In reality, a national sales tax, an excise tax, is as old as the American Revolution. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution provides, "The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States." Income taxes were authorized by the 16th Amendment to the Constitution in 1913, but it wasn't until World War II that withholding federal taxes from our paychecks came into play as a temporary measure. So how would the fair tax work? Well, very easily. It would be collected by the states and remitted to the Treasury Department. As far as state taxes, it depends on which state the taxpayer lives in. Now, I imagine some states would rebel and hike taxes to make a point. At the moment, the only U.S. states without a state income tax are Alaska, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, and Wyoming. However, many more have indicated that they want to either greatly reduce or completely eliminate their state income taxes. In Georgia, where I live, a bill will be introduced shortly to abolish the state income tax and replace it with a version of the fair tax. I believe if the fair tax is passed, it will invigorate America and increase the likelihood of more Americans achieving the American dream. In a day and age where many Americans are pushing for systematic change, we might as well start with changing the federal tax code and try a new system that benefits every American. In conclusion, Chad's article clearly shows why we need to enact the fair tax now. We now have the opportunity to force all members of the House of Representatives to either vote for the present income payroll tax system or vote for the fair tax. They either support the corrupt income tax in the IRS or they want to get rid of it. It can't be any simpler than that. They either believe in being transparent and showing Americans the true cost of their government or they don't. They either support the largest transfer of power from the government to the people, the fair tax, or they don't. If they think the fair tax needs to be changed, then they can propose that change. Don't condemn the entire bill because it has a flaw in it that can be easily addressed, and don't think for a minute there aren't any flaws in the income tax. Please stand with us and demand that your representatives support a much fairer, much simpler, and much more efficient way to fund the government, the fair tax. The fair tax does not pick winners and losers. Because it taxes spending, not earnings, the fair tax lets everyone save for their retirement tax-free. The fair tax collects the revenue that the federal government needs to operate, but does it in a way that has the least adverse impact on our individual freedom and the least impact on our economic prosperity. There are no tax returns to file and no records to keep. We pay our federal taxes when we make retail purchases of new goods and services, and with a fair tax, there's no need for the IRS. If you sell a used couch or used jet ski online, there is no fair tax due on that transaction. The fair tax will allow us to take back control. The income payroll tax system is broken. It's no longer working. We can't repair it, but we can replace it with the fair tax. Join us and take back control of our country and our lives, not with bullets, but with the elimination of one of the biggest threats to our liberty and economic prosperity, the income payroll tax. We should all remember Edmund Burke's warning that applies to our efforts to take back control. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. We should also remember this quote from George Orwell's 1984, which, if we do nothing, may foretell your and your children's future. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. So what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives and attend Zoom town hall meetings demanding that if they really want to allow Americans to take back control, the first step is to eliminate the income payroll tax system and enact the FAIRtax. Take back control. Help us pass the FAIRtax. The IRS will be gone and will pay our taxes when we make purchases. We, not the ruling class and their minions in D.C., will decide how much federal tax we pay, and we'll know how much tax we're paying because taxes will no longer be hidden from us. They'll be clearly shown on every retail receipt. If you have friends who don't know about the FAIRtax, send them to FAIRtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your members of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the FAIRtax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.